The Short Game is listener-supported on Patreon. If you'd like to support the show and join us on our Discord, head to theshortgame.net or patreon.com/theshortgame.
Welcome back to The Short Game. This is a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and this week I am joined by two awesome co-hosts, plus an exciting guest.
Nate Heininger.
Shane Kelly.
And this week we are joined by, let me just say, executive producer Robert Hawks, one of our patrons.
Oh, hi.
Listen, you give us even $1 on Patreon, and you are an executive producer. But thank you for joining us, Robert.
No problem.
I'm excited to have you because we needed some additional help covering this game. The game we're covering this week is a little bit outside of our show's collective, comfort zone. We are talking about Hades, which is on pretty much everybody's Game of the Year list this year. It seems like, everyone that I've seen that's, already out, it's just everywhere on those lists. But it's also really long, so it's not quite the sort of thing that we would normally cover on the show. We have a kind of a long-standing exception for roguelikes because of Nate, basically.
Thank you.
But and this is a roguelike, but it's definitely a long game, one that I was pretty convinced that we were not really going to cover on the show. But I don't know, something about it wore me down. I think the big part of it is just our history with Supergiant. This is Supergiant's fourth game, and we are pretty much all Supergiant super fans.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're doing this game. I've really been enjoying it. I would agree. This barely even fits into our roguelike exception as far as like what we've covered in the past for this show. But, we've all been enjoying it. There is some qualities to it that I think very much respect your time, and it has that short play session capability. So I think, we can wink it into our show because we set our own rules. All right.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to talk about it.
And before we get too far in, I want to set a couple of expectations here. I am mostly here to listen because while I have played the game, I haven't played it nearly as much as either of my co-hosts. And I definitely haven't played it as much as Robert, which is why we've brought him on the show today. Robert, you've been playing this game a lot, and I've seen some of your videos that you've posted to Twitter and things like that. You're playing it at a pretty high level. But how long have you spent with the game? Tell me a little bit about what you've done with it so far.
I've probably spent about 60 hours with it. It's a roguelike game, so you do it in runs, and I've probably sunk about 150 runs into it. And I am still not done with the amount of content that this game has. So definitely not short.
No, it's not.
I think your 150 runs have been maybe more successful than our runs, even just besides the quantity, because roguelikes are definitely my genre. However, I don't think that I am particularly good at this game, and I'm sitting at around 60 runs and just got my first victory, and you have been posting like 11-minute victories on your like 150th run or whatever.
It
and
is
that just
absurd. Looking at that video, I could not tell what was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, when my wife is sitting on the couch and I'm playing the game, she's just like, I can't read this screen at all. And I've done like 150 runs. I've only cleared it like 30 or 40 times. So
you've only cleared it 30 or 40 times. Okay, got it. You're off the show. You fraud.
Yeah, well, that is 30 or 40 times more than any of us have. So,
my friends and I have two friends, Sid and Clayton, and we've been like competitively playing the game to try to get like better times than each other, and it's kind of blinded me to what a normal person plays the game like.
Well, it definitely helps to have that sort of challenge group, keeping yourself motivated. I don't know, Shane, how far you've made it, but today I was like, I need to get a successful run before we record. my roguelike reputation is at stake here. So I got my first victory. It was 45 minutes. So the thought
little
of
off
you
from
getting
11,
through,
but you're getting there.
little off from 11.
Yeah,
but
very
you know
nice.
what? I felt good about it. It was satisfying.
Yeah, I had I've had a pretty good run with the game. I think I've done about 50, probably less than 60 runs. I was having brushes with the game's final boss, and then, and this is just kind of a weird thing. I had recently a bike accident where I just absolutely. This is a little embarrassing, but I was kind of hot dogging. I was riding with my with my hands off the handlebars.
Oh,
Eating a hot dog.
You know, I was biking around the neighborhood. It was a cold day. A Amazon truck was right in front of me, and I was turning in front of him, and I hit a pothole and slid off the bike seat and just did a complete flip and landed on my palms of my hands. And that's been about 2 weeks since that, and I still can barely play video games. So yeah, I'm hoping that by the time I am done recuperating, I will have regained some of the mobility that it takes for me to play this game. But we will see.
Yeah.
It was pretty embarrassing. The Amazon guy pulled over and was like, "Hey, are you okay?"
oh,
Having just made this completely unforced, just very embarrassing death dive. Also, very clearly not okay. Just said, "Yeah, I'm fine."
Do you mean physically fine or emotionally fine? I need a few minutes to decide both.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to sort that out in front of this random guy in the Amazon box truck. So, I just limped home.
yikes!
If you saw what happened, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're feeling okay, and I can imagine a game like this that, especially at the level Robert's playing, it is fast, very, very fast.
It's pretty demanding.
And that was a thing that, and we're going to talk about mechanics, and we're also going to do a spoiler break later where we're going to get much deeper on the story and mechanics and best tips and tricks and whatnot. But that was a big learning curve for me too, is going from trying to play this game kind of slow and methodical to no, it's actually way more effective to be a maniac and just go as fast as you can and avoid everything. So I can imagine with a hurt hand, it would be really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get too far into talking mechanics, because I am really eager to hear specifically from you guys, I need tips. So I'm excited for that. But before we get too far into that, I just wanted to briefly talk a little bit about the history of this game, because I feel like first of all, I loved everything I've played from Supergiant, and each game a little better than the last. I liked Bastion pretty well. I really liked Transistor. If I recall correctly, Transistor was our game of the year for the year that it came out. And then Pyre, wasn't it also our game of the year for the year it came out? I think it was.
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, and
that was a good year for games.
Loved Pyre. I thought Pyre was a really, really great game. And I was very excited. And what's been sort of interesting about it was, at the time, I didn't think I was going to like Pyre before I got into it. I wasn't into the sort of sports ball aspect of it. I wasn't too sure about its sort of visual novel-esque storytelling. And I ended up absolutely loving it. And then the same thing has happened with this. This game came out in early access 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think it only had Tartarus in it when it first came out?
Yeah, I think so. I obviously haven't been following it since early access, but when I heard they were doing an early access game, pretty much everything about this game when they initially announced it had me thinking oh no, they've finally figured out how to make a game that I won't like, because it's a roguelike, which is a genre that is pretty hit or miss for me. It is in early access, which I usually hate and pretty much ignore. I'm not interested in sort of follow. I want to play a game once when it's done and I know I'm getting the full experience. I don't usually follow along on early access journeys. And then there was a lot about it that seemed like it was a big departure for them. I kind of thought that this was Supergiant, like after Pyre wasn't a huge success. I mean, I think it did okay, but from what I understand, it didn't sell super well. I thought this was them trying to like go mainstream and do like, you know, roguelikes are hot right now, right? And like I thought this
effectively it has worked out that way.
Yeah, weirdly enough, like it's
is their biggest mainstream success.
Hit, but it is a very Supergiant game. It feels very much of their thing, and it's so much more my shit than I was expecting. Like, holy crap, this game is way more my shit than I thought it was going to be.
I think it initially came out like in early access on the Epic Games Store.
And I'm sure they got some infusion of cash from that. I mean, good for them.
While we're talking about the kind of progression of games from Supergiant, the thing that I see having progressed absolutely the most on this, and having played so many of their games, is the dialogue. Because we've played a lot of like roguelike games, and this is, while it is an excellent roguelite style game, like the thing that really stands out for it in that genre is the way that it's pushing kind of narrative and dialogue forward in that space. But it's also just very like a linear progression to this from the rest of the games from Supergiant. Like if I remember when it came to Bastion, like their very first big game, the thing that I remember being most impressed with for that game was also its dialogue. It had this fully voiced narrator who was watching you as you like were moving through the game, would react to things you did. It had dialogue that would kind of expand or compress based on like how fast you were moving through the game. Like certain pieces of dialogue would like automatically be included or cut depending on how much time it needed to fill. There were a lot of little tricks like that.
But it was all that single narrator.
Yeah. Even at that time, like having a game that had a narrator who was like very clearly responding to the actual actions that you were doing, and like, you know, if you died would comment on that and things like that. That was pretty unique at the time, and it was really well done. I think like in Pyre, they did something I would say very, very similar. It was a little bit more reactive. The game itself was a lot more complex.
That game, all of the characters were voiced, but they all spoke a sort of a constructed or fake language.
Yeah, I meant to say about Transistor. So Transistor was a lot like Bastion in terms of its like narrative and the writing. I thought the writing was a lot more interesting in Transistor, but I think it was fundamentally they were kind of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Because they had this single narrative voice in the form of the like her sword boyfriend.
Yeah, but they pushed the mechanics way forward with Transistor. They had much more mechanically dense.
I feel like in Transistor there was a lot less like responsive dialogue, like a lot less responsive narration in regard to like what you were doing. Like Rux, the narrator of Bastion, you could hit a guy and he'd be like, you know, hitting that guy.
Hit that guy. He didn't like that much, did he?
Oh yeah. But I feel like your boyfriend, who is also your weapon in Transistor, it didn't really do that.
No, it was a little less, but it was also the sort of battlefields were more complex, and also there was the aspect where you could sort of switch between real time and sort of turn based, and I think all of that kind
mechanically
of
Transistor was crazy.
The narration off, or made it at least not possible to do the same kind of thing they did in Bastion. But they really pushed their mechanics forward, I think it really. I mean, I'm not going to say it peaked with Pyre, because obviously this game is amazing, but like Pyre really felt like their mechanics were, well, they were doing a totally new thing, but it felt like a really finely honed thing. Like they had figured out a new system there with the mechanics for Pyre that were like incredibly finely tuned, and its storytelling was just like way opened up versus the two previous games. Like the fact that they had all these characters. And it was able to tell you a story that responded to your actions in terms of like wins and losses and characters that you had in your party versus didn't. And it could kind of spin you this story reactively as that went on. And you can really see a through line between that specifically and the way they're doing their storytelling in this game, which is incredible. I mean, we'll talk more about the story a little later once we get past mechanics, but like this game, probably the biggest triumph I see is being able to tell a story through a roguelike where there's this huge possibility space for like what you're doing, and yet they're managing to like tell you a consistently interesting story, or at least have good character interactions throughout and never repeat itself, never have like just like a canned thing that you see twice or anything like that.
So Pyre, it definitely did kind of move in this direction of having highly, highly conditional dialogue, because it had that structure of having a story. And especially if you think about the ending of Pyre, where, that thing had to work whether you had like any number of the different characters on your team when you completed the game. You could have many thousands of permutations there. And there was a lot of dialogue in that game, and it was not quite so fully voiced as this. I think they had their own little language and stuff, but there were a lot of there was an awful lot of dialogue. The thing about this game and the way it tells its story is there must be just an absolutely gargantuan condition table for it surfacing the dialogue for you. I tried to read as much as I could about it and find out what I could, but there's some of that same conditionality as Pyre, like the story of I'm sorry, what's the name of the bard character and his girlfriend? Eurydice.
Eurydice and Orpheus?
Orpheus. Yeah. I was trying to dredge Orpheus out of my memory there. So Eurydice and Orpheus, without getting into spoilers, are totally optional. You don't have to talk to them or advance their storytelling at all. And yet, they are also able to like respond to things that are going on in other parts of the story. You have characters like Hypnos, who is like very directly there to respond to exactly what's been happening in the story. But then you get into these like really weird conditional setups where like it's going to present you every time you interact with like some of the early bosses, or Megara is the kind of the most vocal boss. I think probably Megara's character has probably more conditions involved in the sort of things she will say to you than many games have in their entire like structure.
Yeah, I just looked this up so that we'd have this information in the podcast in case folks are curious. This game has 21,000 voice lines recorded. And it's crazy. Over 300,000 words in the script.
And how do you create a game where like there's going to be someone like me who's going to play this game literally hundreds of times before they win and make a successful run, versus someone who's going to get the same story but told to them over the course of maybe 10 runs because they're an elite Uber gamer, right? And then you have all of these things that have to be surfaced and said at the right time to make the story make sense, and have to conditionally work based on the things that other characters have said or other things that you have done. But then you also have like some weird example. Here's a weird example. At one point, Megara will say to you at one point, like, you're getting stronger as you start using the mirror to build your power up, right? And she'll have conversations where she notices and reacts to that. But then if you turn off the stuff on the mirror, like if you reset the mirror with the key and don't spend a lot, she'll comment on that too. She'll say like, oh, you seem like you're more back to your old self. Have you stopped using the mirror? So
yeah, and things like in the game you can get little keepsakes from different characters if you give them like an item, and depending on which keepsake you're holding, each like boss or person you run into that has like dialogue, they can say something about the like 30 different keepsakes that you can hold at any one given time.
Or other boons.
So they're just like, oh, you're holding Poseidon's thing.
Nice.
What slippery thing.
Yeah, the way the game is able to divvy out story, regardless of what your exact situation is is remarkable, and I do agree is really probably the biggest triumph of this game. But before we get too far into the actual like specifics of the story, let's talk a little bit more about the mechanics and like how you actually play the game. So things like the mirror that Shane was talking about, like, make a little bit more sense.
Nate,
so
you're the resident expert on roguelikes. Why don't you set it up for us?
Great transition, Reagan A+.
All right, I am the resident expert at playing them, and somewhere in the middle at expressing game vocabulary. So in the game, you play as Zagreus, the son of Hades, and your goal is to escape Hades. And that is presented to you as a would you call it? Is that isometric, like a
more or less,
third person?
Yeah.
Third person isometric dungeon crawler, essentially, where you are going to utilize a set of basic skills, and as you progress deeper and deeper and deeper into the dungeon, you are unlocking new skills, new abilities granted to you by gods that make you more powerful and more specialized. In a lot similar to other roguelikes, the order at which these they call them boons, these power-ups appear are completely random, and you have some choice as to what you actually select when they're presented to you. And when you die, you start back at the beginning of the game. There is some element that allows you to power up your character for every single run, but the individual runs, completely clean slate. You're starting at the very beginning, trying to fight your way through the hell spawn of Hades and up and out.
And it rules.
Yeah, and so it has an incredibly tight gameplay loop, which is really, really satisfying. It takes almost no time to start a new run. You get to select a variety of different weapons from standard, like this is my sword and this is my shield, to some more elaborate and interesting weapons that we will save for after the spoiler break. They each have their own sort of power-ups that you can get throughout the runs, as well as a skill tree that you can unlock after your runs. There's a variety of different currencies in this game that you collect that allow you to do things like make your weapon stronger, make your eventual boons stronger, make Zagreus have better health or deal more damage. You get the different keepsakes that Shane mentioned that you can upgrade and level up. There's a ton of small systems that add up to basically every run you are making Zagreus like a % stronger, one way or another. You get to choose kind of what direction you're making him stronger. But at the end of the day, you're getting slightly stronger, slightly stronger, slightly stronger. And unless you're someone like Robert, who can just like beat the game on your first try or whatever you did.
It took me like 30 tries to get my first win.
For most of us normies out there, it's like you're getting deeper and deeper and deeper, but you're pretty reliant on those. It's a combination of relying on just Zagreus and your tools getting stronger, as well as your own skill, which is kind of a hallmark of a roguelike or games like this, where you're going to just need to get better at fighting the variety of monsters that you fight, getting deeper and deeper and deeper until hopefully you're able to make it out to the other side. Each run takes like between, 30 seconds and 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes if you go all the way to the end. Probably your mileage may vary on that. Once you die, you kick right back to the beginning, and as Shane said, you can choose to like interact with a bunch of characters and really progress different things, or you can hop right back in and start another run like 15 seconds after your last run ended.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning. I think Hades is more of like a roguelite.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because there's like 4 types of collectibles that you can get throughout the underworld in your normal runs that are like permanent things that you hold on to after you die. And if you die, you get transported back to like this hub world where there's like 10 NPCs that you can interact with, and each time you die, they each get new dialogue. And they like either respond to things that you did on your last run, or they just have new storylines that are developing constantly. And like you can
They have
spend all
relationships
of
that
these-
progress based on gifts you give them. I thought that was pretty.
I was going to
interesting.
mention that this is so Persona to me. The way that you are like constantly like you have a little free time, and now you have to decide with your free time. Okay, am I going to go give Nectar of the Gods to my dad, or am I going to go give it to the cute floating head? Like you have this opportunity to like kind of make choices about like which relationships you are kind of tending, and see more story based on which of these characters you're spending more time interacting with.
That's funny. I thought of it as like Harvest Moon. You know, like, oh, I'm going to go and give this thing that I collected to this person to make them like me more, just like you would do in Harvest Moon. And yeah, Robert, I agree completely that like, and I kind of said it at the beginning, this is a rogue light, and it's like on the lightest version of Rogue. I mean, there is so much that you are carrying over with you, and you are becoming like that when you end the game, the Zagreus that you're playing is so much stronger and so much more capable than the things that are available to you are so much stronger than when you start the game, that it really doesn't feel like most roguelikes or roguelites.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about like what are the things that set this apart, because like roguelikes and roguelites generally are games that are super hit or miss for me, and this one I immediately felt like it was hitting for me. And there's definitely a few things that this is doing that I think make it really successful as one of those. Maybe you guys have other thoughts about it. For me, a big part of it is just that it's very generous with upgrades. You're getting a very steady stream of upgrades as you play through. So for me, what can really be frustrating in a roguelike is that feeling of like, I've got like no health left. This run is a disaster and there's no hope. And I know that, and the upgrades or health or whatever else you're hoping to get drop so infrequently that it feels unfair, or that it feels like you're starving in the desert or whatever. Whereas this is like pretty much, so every single room gives you something when you complete it. And very frequently they are upgrades that are very meaningful and can help transform your playstyle.
I feel like a thing that makes this a really successful roguelike is the fact that they give you so much stuff and so much content back at the hub world that like changes and increases every time you die, that like you don't even mind if you die. If you're having a great run and then like you die like 10 minutes in or so, you're like, all right, cool, I get to go see what Deuce is doing now. I get to go put keys in.
I heard whenever they like the sort of the pitch, the conversation that started the development of this game was essentially Supergiant Games like asking themselves, how do we make a roguelike where it's fun when you die?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that they completely accomplished that here, because like most of these games you get, if you're like 30 minutes in and you die on like the last boss, that can still be a little disappointing. But it is, that like the power curve of this game really does make it where like once you get to, so there's 4 main sections. Once you've bested the boss of that section, you're probably gonna be capable of doing it almost every time you play going forward. And then you get to the point because of your own skills, but also because your character is just getting stronger every single time, that those bosses eventually become like trivial. Like if you've been playing for a while and Zagreus is totally buffed, Meg, as Shay mentioned, is one of the first bosses, potentially, and like real killer at the start, but by the time you are making it near the end game constantly, like it's really not hard to get past Meg. I don't want to say it's impossible to die to her, but like you have so much more health, your attacks do so much more damage that what was like a 5-minute fight the first time you played her, you can beat her in like 10 seconds if you're really good when you see her in the future. And I think most roguelikes like don't power you up to that degree. There's still that element that like I might die in any room, whereas Hades, like you're just going to keep getting stronger and making it deeper and deeper and deeper until you are pretty consistently making it that far.
If I can kind of comment on what I think makes this unique for roguelites that I have played, it's not just the amount of upgrades and power-ups that they're dropping on you, which, as you guys were saying, I think is pretty high for this sort of genre. It is... So one of the things that makes something a roguelite, or a big part of the DNA of rogue type games, is randomness. And there is a great degree of randomness to this game, but they give you many, many ways to control that randomness. So you never feel like you're in a run that is just a dead end because, you rarely feel that some run is going to be doomed because of some bad thing, or that's out of your control. And to start, that is that many of the rooms, or most of the rooms, will have more than one exit, and you're able to see what the reward would be generally, whether it be a boon or one of the currencies, and choose which door you want, right? So that's one thing. But giving you lots of choice, and that goes to every level. When you do get a boon, you get a choice of 3 different versions of that boon. So you've already chosen, door number 2 that's going to give you a boon from a particular god. Maybe you really like playing with the damage of over time that Dionysus gives you. But when you get there, you'll actually have 3 possible choices. And those choices are then influenced by different upgrades that you can make to Zagreus through the mirror that let you adjust like the drop rates for different kinds or rarities of the boons. There is a currency that you can use to re-roll those things. There's a ton of variety that's possible, but you have a lot of ability to kind of sculpt the run. So it does feel like you're able to do a build. And that's something where I think that they really kind of pulled the right choices out of the DNA of Transistor, which was really build-based, and they gave you just so many different options. And the way that they kind of challenged the player was about taking certain ones away as if you would die, they would be burned out for a little while. But most of the time, you had nearly all of your options available to you. This one, they do a lot of, what would you do if you got this set of choices? How could these things work together? And it really encourages like experimentation without taking away your feeling of control. I think another good example of that is the weapons. There's a currency called Darkness that is one of those permanent currencies. It's probably especially early on in the game, the most important upgrade currency you have. And there's like a 20% bonus if you pick one random weapon, So it's a real great encouragement for people to try all the weapons and experiment and see how things work differently. And there's these prophecies that, it very directly reward you for trying all the boons and trying boons that you haven't tried before, while still giving you a lot of ability to control the randomness and get what you want if you really are trying to get a specific build. So I think that aspect of it really brilliant.
I love the random benefit on the weapon. That is actually what I ended up. That's how I've been doing the game for the majority of it, is select the weapon that has been randomly selected for you as the benefit one, because I think my normal way of playing a game like this would be like, all right, I'm just going to use a sword and I'm going to play the sword until I'm so good that I beat it. And then I'll try a different weapon and I'll beat it with that weapon and I'll kind of go down the line. But this game incentivizes trying different playstyles so much in so many different ways. I wanted to lean into it. And so now when I play, I don't choose the weapon myself. I just let whatever sort of the RNG has decided for me. And that's been a lot of fun and also been pretty eye-opening for some of the weapons that you think, like don't seem as good. They are all good in their own way.
Yeah, like at first I was very confused by the shield, and then my best run that I've had so far was the shield. So
yeah, that was my favorite weapon at first. So I was thinking we could talk a little bit specific about what some of these benefits look like. So the
favorite runs and builds,
boons, like
you know what I think? I think an approach might be just for us to talk about like favorite builds or like particular builds that we've had that worked well for us.
Good place for tips.
Well, there are 5 main things. One that you can pick up in the runs. You have your basic attack, and you have a dash, and then with each dash you have a like specific to that weapon dash strike. I got 6. And then you have each weapon has a special attack, and each weapon has like 4 different variants of the weapon that you can unlock that each give you a different special. And then you have a cast, which is like you have these crystals like as a permanent inventory thing when you're on a run that you can throw out, and different boons that different gods give you can turn your cast into something different. And then gods can grant you boons that are called calls that are like specific things, specific attacks or power-ups or things that you build meter for in the like middle of runes, and then you like call upon that god, and then they help you like a summon.
It's almost like a special move, like you have to unlock it in game. So every one of those moves can be redefined entirely by the upgrades that you can find within the game. So you can find something like there's a hammer upgrade. It's called the Daedalus hammer that actually impacts the weapon and may change. So there's a spear that you have. One upgrade you can get for the spear is that it becomes, instead of 1 spear thrust, it becomes 3 spear thrusts. And that's one of my favorite spear upgrades, and it makes your weapon is much bigger range of attack. But there are even more ridiculous ones that turn like there's a gun. I was gonna shoot.
There's a gun.
Yeah, I know. I started to where you can turn it into
a gun where the special is you can like lob a grenade, but you can get a Daedalus hammer that like they completely change how your weapon functions in certain aspects. Like you get like a grenade that you throw, but if you get a Daedalus hammer, it turns into a rocket launcher. It just really unique things that completely change the way the game is played.
So what is everyone some of your favorite boons that you found, if you can remember them, and what god gave them to you?
I could say for me, one of the most fun ones to play with. The game has a lot of different kinds of status effects. And in fact, there's an upgrade you can get from the mirror, which is an upgrade to Zagreus that gives you bonus damage when you have applied multiple different status effects to your enemies, which I've never seen that in a game. I thought that was interesting. But the thing I had the most fun with early on was Dionysus. Dionysus as a god is the kind of god of wine. And I'm struggling to remember the name of the status effect. It's effectively like a poison. It's damage over time. Hangover. That's right.
Yes.
It's pretty funny. But so there are a lot of I think you can apply up to 5 levels of hangover, and they sort of slowly drain off of your enemy, and the amount of damage is influenced by how many levels of this you have. And I had one run that was one of the most fun, although it wasn't a totally successful run, where I was using the shield, and we've mentioned the hammer. The hammer probably the biggest influence on like how a run is going to go is like if you get the hammer very early and you get one of the good modifications from the Daedalus hammer. But the hammer upgrade that I picked up early in that run was that it increased the number of enemies that a thrown shield would bounce off of. So instead of hitting like, I think 2 enemies, it hit like 5 enemies or something like that. And before coming back to you.
I got that exact same upgrade in probably my best run yet. Like I haven't gotten nearly as far as you guys have, but like, oh man, that's fun to use.
Yeah, there's no aim involved. It's a nice spammy thing, and it's good to be able to deal with enemies at range. But I'll tell you what's really good is to have damage over time applied on top of that, so that you can just like auto hit 5 enemies in the map, and just like spam your way through while they slowly die. Yeah, I was killing enemies before they like appeared on screen with that build.
Nice.
So that was a lot of fun. There's even another one of the boons you can get from him that ups the like number of levels of Hangover that can be applied to, I think, 10.
Yeah, I think most of the gods have like stacks that you can just apply and just spam the hell out of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So all of that stuff I found really, really fun when you found this, like, a combination of a couple of, the hammer or boons and things like that like made a really interesting synergy like that.
Yeah, I haven't had a ton of runs yet, as I mentioned earlier, but my most successful run yet was one where very early on I think it was the first upgrade I got was an upgrade from Poseidon to the dash. And that one,
it's the best boon in the game.
It rules. So I assume I'm talking about the same one you're thinking of there. Basically, when you dash, it kind of does this splash effect on wherever you were dashing from, like wherever your dash started, and it kind of does an area of effect damage. And so what was weird about it was it felt way higher damage than I would have expected for something like that in this type of game. And then I had several opportunities to upgrade it, and very quickly it was the thing that I could do that did the most damage. Like my attack, nothing. My cast, embarrassing. But dashing past people did like just massive amounts of damage all at once. And so for that run, I pretty much only hit one button. I was just spamming dash the entire time, dashing back and forth around people and just doing this massive damage. And it could happen very fast. And I think I got some upgrades that let me dash multiple times very quickly. So I could like dash, 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 or dash, 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 dash. And I was just like annihilating people until I finally got to somebody where this trick wasn't working particularly well on them and failed. But that was probably my best upgrade I got so far.
Yep, Poseidon and Athena both have dash boons that just turn your dash into a whole extra attack.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just dealing double damage if you're dashing, and you have iframes while you're dashing. So you're basically dealing free damage. Like, you're not getting hit. So
yeah, and the Poseidon dash also pushes enemies away from you. And this game can get really clustered. Some of these little fights will have a whole lot of things on you. And so being able to just dash around and push them all around the map is really satisfying, first of all, and then second of all, very effective.
I think with that build, I didn't take any damage until I ended up in what's the zone that has like the river of fire all around? The second zone
Asphodel.
or third, I forget.
Asphodel.
Yeah, and I didn't take any damage until I got there, and then at first I kept dashing into the flames, and I was like,
I have the same problem, Reagan.
Be more careful.
There's a keepsake that has become my favorite one, where you get a benefit every time you finish an encounter without taking any damage. And there's nothing more frustrating than being the only damage you take in an encounter being when you accidentally dashed into the lava. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, a lot of that. Man.
They actually have a lot of elements of the design of the different levels that changes as you go, that forces you to be a little bit more of an all-around, because the game has so many synergies that it's very tempting to over-specialize. And just go all in on like, well, I'm gonna do nothing but boons and things that increase my main attack damage or my special ranged attack damage or what have you. But if you don't have something that's going to allow you to, for example, reflect or get iframes when you run into like the room full of witches that are spamming death orbs everywhere. Like suddenly the game has turned into Ikaruga, and like you're stuck on the wrong color, you know?
They incentivize you to pick like more than one type of boon from more than one type of god, because like there's a mirror upgrade that like you get 2.5% extra damage for each individual god you have a boon from. And then there's duo boons that you can unlock that, like, if you have like an Ares boon and a Poseidon boon, like one room you'll run into Ares and he'll be like, oh, hey, what's up, Poseidon? And then they'll just have a little exchange, and then you'll get a boon that like combines the effects of their two focuses, and I think that's wonderful. Some of the best boons in the game are duo boons.
Also, some great dialogue, because you get characters talking to each other that you don't get to see in any other way.
Totally. So, do you have any, Robert? Do you have any like particular builds that you mentioned that you thought the Poseidon dash was particularly strong? Do you have anything else that you think people ought to be on the lookout for?
I think Poseidon's dash is the best boon in the game. Zeus's attack, which shoots chain lightning out anytime you attack an enemy, and that includes dash strikes, I think. And then Artemis has a boon that anytime you attack, use a special, or use a cast, it like shoots an arrow out. So if you have those three on a single build, then you are dealing like 4 times. You have 4 different types of damage output. So it's you just steamroll everything.
Yeah, the map looks crazy when you have that one.
The Artemis one you mentioned was the first time I got that. I felt it was absolutely hilarious, because I mean it's extremely effective, but you look like some kind of space harrier, like dropping mega missiles everywhere. Like you're slamming around the battlefield. Every time you deal damage to anything, like a tiny green missile like deploys from your shoulder and like laser hones in on whatever the nearest enemy is. It's absolutely hilarious.
The wording on that boon when you run into it is confusing, because it's like anytime you cast, it shoots an arrow out, but also your special and attack do it, but it doesn't make it super clear that that's the case. I kind of figured that out on accident.
Yeah, I probably skipped it now that you mentioned, because I don't use cast very often at all. I just haven't really kind of made that part of most of my builds. It kind of feels a little like, I assume there's ways to make it completely OP, but the fact that it's like at the very beginning, it's like no damage at all, and it's limited to like you have to throw it and then you have to go recollect the crystal before you can do it again. It just feels so nothing.
Yeah, and sometimes it'll get stuck inside an enemy. Like if you throw it at a guy, it's in there until he's dead. So
yeah, so I basically don't use it. Are there builds where you kind of structured around that the cast, or is it? Am I right in thinking it's kind of eh?
I don't like it. I barely ever use the cast. Ares has a good cast where it turns your cast into just like one of those spinning blades. So, you know.
Blade Rift.
Did you guys get the one from... Reagan hasn't even seen this character, because I think they come along a little bit later in the game. So maybe this is a spoiler. Reagan, cover your ears.
Covered.
The cold one?
Yeah, the cold one.
The cold one.
Yeah.
Crack open the cold one?
And
yeah, it's a beer.
The cast for the icy one, basically the instead of casting, you chuck out a little crystal that shoots a homing laser and just sits on the board like zapping things, and so that's pretty rad. But the really overall, the cast to me is useful for one main thing, and it's not related to any of the boons. It's the mirror ability called, I think, Blighted Blood or something like that. And it basically just says, you know, when you have the cast Bloodstone attached to an enemy, all your attacks deal bonus damage to that enemy. So it really is just a good way to like focus down bosses. It's like just one more thing for you to spam at bosses.
So I think we all enjoy this game enough, and there's so much complexity and variety that we could probably spend the next 3 hours just talking about our favorite builds and our favorite boons and all the different things that we've seen. But I think for the sake of our listeners and for the time, I think we need to move forward. But before we get
our listeners are going to want to tune in for Hades episode 2, where we're going to cover builds, boons, and ships. Who's your favorite cutie?
I 100% ship Dusa with Zagreus, just 100%. It's so cute. It's so cute.
Yeah,
she's really ahead of the rest.
Anyway, I say there's one last mechanic thing that I do think is interesting, and it again talks about this power curve that you sort of create with your character. But one of the currencies that you're collecting are gemstones, and those gemstones can be used with the house contractor to actually build in new rooms into the dungeon, as well as just visual elements like making things prettier, adding a rug and things like that. But more importantly, earlier in
the couch in the hub world.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think it's pretty smart, because people are going to be playing this game like a lot, and you're going to get past the actual like necessary upgrades, and you're just going to have these gemstones. So like, sure, why not make that couch look nicer? Why not like clean up that room and make your bed better, or whatever it is? It's pretty smart just to continue to add replayability. But early on, it actually is helping you out. You are able to you spend these gems to actually add in things like fountains that restore your health and give you a free upgrade. They don't really exist in most of the levels until you actually go and unlock them. It can be like a run saving thing to go and find a fountain where your health gets refilled and a free upgrade. So you're not encountering things like that early on. You're also adding in things like breakable pots a la Zelda that are full of money. And there's a merchant character that you are able to buy things from. So once you've unlocked this, you are more likely to have more money, thus making you able to buy more things from the merchant. So it all comes together, again, just to make you more capable and more powerful. And it's just another avenue that that you have to make yourself stronger. And there's also in the hub world, there is a resource trader that will let you turn in some of these resources for another resource. And it has this whole sort of scale up system where you can end up turning some of the lowest value currencies with enough of them into the highest value currency. So even if you like really struggle at beating the bosses where you're getting the highest value currency, you can still get them by way of getting the lesser value and trading it up, which will eventually get you strong enough.
Listeners, don't waste the diamonds or Titan's blood. Do not.
Oh my God, no!
I accidentally turned in my first Titan's blood for like 200 gemstones or something, and I was so mad. I was like, so I still regret it. But
well, a thing I wanted to say about the weapons earlier is that there are super like rare resources. Like there's ambrosia, Titan's blood, and diamonds that you only get from like defeating a boss.
First time.
The first time, but it's the first time for each individual weapon. So if you've beaten that boss and gotten like a diamond for doing it, if you've beaten that boss with a sword and gotten the diamond, you'll get darkness the next time you fight him with the sword. But if you fight him with like the gun, then you'll get another diamond.
That's awesome. I didn't realize that.
So it's another way to just incentivize you to.
Use and on that, a hint that I really wish I had taken seriously that the game tells you. So the game tells you this early on. It tells you like each weapon will unlock basically like you're progressing with each weapon through the depth of the dungeon. You're told by my favorite character, Skelly, has the best voice in the game.
Did you know that Skelly and Zagreus are the same voice actor?
Daniel Korb, who is also
he was the narrator on like all of the other games.
He's the composer.
No. He's the composer.
Oh, the composer. The narrator is
the voice of Hades.
Right. You're right.
So yeah, Darren Korb, which we're not going to talk about the music very much in this game, but I'll just say that it's awesome. It's as good as all the other games, but
it's good.
They're all consistently so good.
So anyway, so Zagreus is like, well, how am I supposed to keep track of that? And Skelly says, well, have you ever heard of a thing called pen and paper or something like that? Basically saying like, write it down, you idiot. And it's true. Like if you're just starting this game, I actually recommend that you keep notes on your phone or however of like how far you've made it with each weapon. Because if you're like me and you're constantly switching weapons around, when I got to the point where I was like, oh, I actually want to like collect another diamond or another Titan's blood or something like that, I couldn't remember how far I'd gotten with each weapon. So I did eventually start writing it down.
That's a really good point. I'd never thought to do that. Thank you for suggesting.
Well, it was Skelly's suggestion.
Well, thank you to Skelly. I haven't gotten that dialogue yet. Well, we got to talk about story. I want to talk about the characters and the story. Now, at the risk of running into spoiler territory here, because I'm not nearly as far as y'all are. And I know there's a lot of story content to this. So at some point we need to hit spoiler break, and I'll probably hop off for you guys to talk any further story spoilers. But I'm just so impressed with how this game tells its story. Like I've never played a roguelike that even really had a story. Like a lot of them kind of have this sort of really basic, like, you're trying to get to the top of the mountain / bottom of the pit, and you've got to try a bunch of times. And there is that story of like, this is the story of a guy trying to get to the bottom of the pit or whatever. But in between, there's no real story. It's usually just sort of like the stories are the things that killed you along the way, right? But this has like consistent, constant drip feed of dialogue from characters that seem like super honed to like work on your, shipper brain. Like all the characters are like just good and interesting enough that you like want to see what they have to say to each other and to Zagreus.
There have been points in playing this game where like I'll exhaust the dialogue with the characters at the hub world, and then I'll start a run with the thought in my mind like, what's the fastest I can kill myself so that I can continue this storyline?
Yeah, man.
Because I just want more.
I'm like, I've got, oh wow, I got a nectar in the first screen. Wow, I'm gonna like jump into some lava so I can go bring that nectar home to whoever, and I want to sweet talk. It's great.
That's funny. Yeah, I think one of the things that this game clearly is trying to do, which most roguelikes don't do, is they wanted to justify why you're doing this over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to actually be like a purposeful story element and not just like something that kind of winks every time. Like, yeah, you're starting over. The only other game I can think of, and I know there are other roguelikes that do it, but one that I always appreciated their effort at explaining to you why you're doing this over and over was Rogue Legacy, where every time you're playing as the child of the one that you played as before, which is a really funny way to handle characters dying over and over and over. But this game really, really does a fantastic job of creating a world and a justification for why and how your character could be slain brutally and yet come right back and go right back into that same dungeon and be the same character, the same person, the same thing that had just died, but is back for more. It's really smart.
Yeah, and it has that feeling of like, so I know there's details. So like, okay, why is Zagreus trying to escape from the underworld that I haven't unraveled yet? I've unraveled a little bit of it at the point in the game that I'm at, but it feels like there's like details about that I haven't gotten to yet. But I will say that like it has this feeling of like, Zagreus as a character, part of the like, this is his rebellion against his father. He's like, fuck this place, fuck my dad, I'm getting out. And it has this sort of almost like, he reads to me as like mid-20s, but it has this sort of like teenage feel to it, right? Like he's like, no, fuck this place, and I'm out, and I don't care how futile or self-destructive or repetitive or ridiculous this is what I'm doing. I'm getting out. And I buy it, right? Like his character just works with that. Like there's something about that just really feels really great.
Mm-hmm. And the first person that's helping him along the way is his adoptive mother, Nyx. who gives him the mirror. And I found a lot of the relationships surrounding Nyx to be some of the more interesting kind of story elements, because of course Nyx is the bride of Hades, so there's that tight relationship. And then I also, the only character that you're really not that's not like kind of a page right out of the books of myth is, I guess, Chaos. And the kind of relationship between Chaos and Nyx is something that I was really enjoying exploring by kind of trying to connect the dots with those characters.
Yeah, it's really clever because they cannot and could not know how long it's going to take you to get to each part, right? Mm-hmm. It does seem like there are like unlocks, new characters and things like that come about when you have made it to a certain depth of the dungeon. I'm assuming that's sort of their trigger mechanism for introducing some of these new characters and plot elements, but they cannot know how long that's going to take you. So they have to make content enough to suffice that you may be stuck trying to kill that second boss for like 40 runs, and you need stuff to read and stuff to be told while you're still doing that same thing over and over. And so they also clearly made the choice to really, really, really focus on the characters and just everything they're feeling and everything they like and everything they want to do and who they care about, what fellow gods are their friends, what fellow gods do they hate. That like most of it is pretty detached from like what's actually going on. It's just world building over and over and over. And then there will be like plot developments that are pretty sparse. But overall, like I've been playing this game for a while now, and I have felt that like plot is like their bottom priority. That said, it is a significantly deep and complex world. Does that make sense? Like
it does.
What
struck me about it is like it isn't so much like there's not like massive story beats happening or anything like that. You're right. Yeah. It's not plot-y. But I think it's really carried on character interaction. Like you want to see these characters talk to each other. You want to see how these characters feel about each other. You don't so much care that like they've got some big action to do, right? Like, and the game can't do that. Like it can't, because it doesn't know where you are at exactly at any given point. Like how long do I have from this moment of story to the end of this person's experience with the game? It could be, 10 hours. It could be 200 hours, depending on how this person is playing. So like they have to really rely on providing like really compelling character interaction that is, maybe a little bit unmoored from plot. And that still really works because these writers know what the hell they're doing. They know how to create these like characters that are compelling in and of themselves.
I think they've landed on a really great kind of bunch of thematic stuff with the Greek myth here as it relates to the roguelike elements. I think it's especially clear when you look at the inclusion of Sisyphus in the game, because a roguelike game is about repeating essentially the same challenge over and over and over again, until you surmount it. But the game is over when you have surmounted that challenge. Like eventually your time with the game will end. But, if you look at the experience of Zagreus in the game, especially once we get into some of the like late game spoilers, and if you look at the experience of someone like Sisyphus eternally rolling a boulder up a hill only to do so again and again, and if you look at the just bleak reality of actual human life that we're all experiencing here in 2020, I think you'll start to see some real parallels.
Well, they kind of backed into that one since they started writing on this game back in 2018, but I guess that works out.
I'm joking with that last one. Sorry, my gallows humor is coming out as we're getting here towards hopefully what is the end of the pandemic.
Oh, please God.
with all the like, drip fed content that you get throughout the course of the game, it makes me really curious what happens if you like start a new run and you just like beat the final boss on your first run. Like you don't learn why you're doing it or anything like that. You don't meet any of the characters. I wonder if they have like unique dialogue.
They have to.
For
that was
that.
the same.
They have to.
That's the same stuff people did with Pyre, like, which is my favorite Supergiant game. I know we talked about it earlier, but like, what does Pyre do as a game if you never win a game of Wizard NBA Jam? Like, they have to have a way to account for that. And I assume that they have a way to account for this game of you like either winning on your first try, or I assume that there's something that happens even if you're on run like 200 and you still have not, completed a run. Like, I assume the characters, the story, like the dialogue has to start to adapt to that situation. But I think the game gives you enough that probably most people have a relatively similar power curve and play experience with this game, but probably add like plus or minus like 10 to 15 runs on each side, depending on your individual skill level.
I think it's worth mentioning briefly that if you are trapped in that kind of a stuck point hell, there is a God mode you can enable for the game that lets you. I think it like triples the damage you do or something like that.
It increases your damage resistance.
That's
like
right.
Each time you die, it increases your damage resistance by like I think 2% up to 80. So if you're just real bad at it, then you won't be taking damage.
And I think there are a lot of people out there who are just not going to be great with this kind of game, and that said, still really want to explore the kind of narrative elements of the game, like the structure of the game, and like so much of the appeal for so many very clearly is the gigantic dysfunctional family of Greek gods that people are interested in seeing.
I have to imagine there's a I forget who delivers the line. I want to say it's Zeus, but I'm not sure. They say something to the effect of, "Don't worry, Zagreus, we gods are constantly killing each other." And I have to imagine that is essentially the like light bulb moment for why they went with Greek mythology for the game. If we know that they started with the idea of like we wanted to make a roguelike that was fun to die, and thus we need a way to justify why you're dying. Like, what world do we set that in? And then someone says, well, the Greek gods were kind of constantly fighting and killing each other. It's like, bingo, let's set this in the Greek god universe, and then we can basically do whatever we want because they were all constantly dying and coming back. It's pretty brilliant.
Well, I think it's probably time for us to start moving towards talking about spoilers in this game. There's a lot of story, a lot of exciting stuff to talk about. And personally, I don't want to hear it because I haven't gotten that far yet. And I really want to experience the story myself. So I am about to bounce. But I'm excited to hear the rest of what you guys have to say after I've had some time to spend some more time with the game. So we're going to record a spoiler segment here, just without me, which is cool. So before we do that, first of all, because I'm about to hop off, Robert, thank you so much for supporting the show and for joining us on the episode. It's really nice to have somebody who has played more of it than we have, which with a game like this is particularly useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I was excited to be invited on, and I've spent so much time with this game that, like, I don't know. I just had a lot to say.
Yeah. I think it's the kind of game that once people have had some time with it, there's a lot to talk about. And I also thanks to our listeners for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. If you haven't found us before, you can find our website at www.theshortgame.net, where you'll find a contact form and other ways to contact us, including things like Twitter @_shortgame. And you can find us on all the podcast platforms. We would love it if you would leave us ratings and reviews. You can also support our show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/theshortgame. All of our patrons at even $1 a month get immediate access to our Discord, which is where we talk about the games we're playing for the show. We have a channel open talking about Hades right now. We have a channel open talking about the IF Comp results that were just released today. We'll be following up on that soon. So if you want to join us and chat, we would love to have you. Patreon.com/theshortgame. So before we go to our spoiler break, Nate, where can people find you?
On Twitter at NateSTL.
And Shane, where can people find you?
You can also find me on Twitter at 8BitShane.
And you can find me on Twitter at RayganK. That's RayGank. And Robert, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Jester Rubella. That's Rubella. And sometimes I post clips of me going fast in Hades.
Nice. Yeah, go check those out. They are very, very impressive, at least the ones I've seen so far. So here it is, ladies and gentlemen, your spoileriest of spoiler breaks.
Okay, so spoilers. You've all gotten to Styx, right?
Let's talk spoilers, y'all.
Yeah, yes. So I had my first complete run today. I defeated Hades for the first time today. It was my fourth time getting to Hades.
And Shane, you haven't beaten it, right?
I have not, but I am not sensitive to spoilers, and I have spoiled myself on some of the post-Hades endgame.
Yeah, this game is wild because you beat Hades for the first time, and then you beat Hades 10 more times to get the credits.
Yeah.
And then you beat it 30 more times to get an epilogue. And then there's still shit that you can find.
Yeah.
Just
That's
wild.
so funny. I knew the game wasn't done when you beat Hades for the first time. But I was wondering, like, okay, what's it gonna, like, am I gonna beat Hades, get into, onto Earth, meet my mom, and then, like, get stabbed by someone and have to start over? But no, of course, they make it pretty smart where you can only spend, like, so much, you're bound to hell.
Yeah.
So you can only spend so much time on Earth. But still, it was very, very satisfying beating Hades for the first time. I also say that the run prior to it, I also made it to Hades, and I made it to Hades on, like, the skin of my teeth. I barely got to him, and then I had, like, the perfect fight. I was crushing him, and I got him down to 0 health, and I was like, hell yeah, I beat Hades. And then, of course, I should have known.
You hit a second
You
form.
always, the final boss
Yeah,
always has
2
a
health
second
bars.
form. There's always going to be a second form on a final boss. I should have known. And then, of course, I just got crushed in the second form of Hades.
So, Nate, you just unlocked Heat. Then you unlock the Pact of Punishment. So you can actually
Yes.
increase the amount of forms he has. So you can give him 3
That's-
health bars later on.
I saw that. So it when I went into the room with Skelly, and they're like, oh, what's going on with that thing now? So I haven't actually interacted with it. The last thing I did with this game before recording was complete my first run. So
Yeah,
But
as
I'll
I
tell you-
understand it, like, that's how you can grind for more of those very limited items, like the Titan's Blood and the diamonds, because when you up the heat level,
It
you
resets.
can use the same weapon again. Yeah, they
Yeah.
reset.
okay, that's good to
So
know. I
that's
was
pretty
wondering
cool.
how you get a lot more, because Titan Blood feels really limited, and there's so many upgrades for Titan Blood. So I had been assuming that it was something post first win that would allow
Mhm.
you to get more of that, but that
But
makes
it
more
it
sense.
does lock you into it. So like if you beat Hades with the fists, and then like you increase your heat level in the Pact of Punishment to like 1, you can't increase it to 2 and get more upgrades. You are just stuck in that, and until you can beat it with 1 heat, like you'll just keep getting darkness again for bosses you've already finished.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
Interesting. Yeah, the run I had today was a really satisfying combo. I had the Poseidon upgrade, the Poseidon dash, and then I was using the sword, and I had the Daedalus upgrade that makes it when you do your special, it does double special, but it doesn't kick them back. And so basically I just the rest of the game I was just collecting boons that made my special more stronger. So I would just dash around with Poseidon's Wave, pushing everyone around. And then when I had an opening, do the special so it hits them twice. And I've already kind of moved them around with Poseidon's Wave, that I didn't die for the first time until I got to Hades. And which was unlike every other game that I'd had, where I'd been pretty reliant on who's the random chance in Elysium who will reset all your death defy?
Patroclus. Patroclus. One of those.
Yeah, that person.
Reagan put the right one in.
That person. Yeah, that person had been the kind of the core of any success I'd had so far, which was being able to reset my death defy on the third phase.
Yeah, I do have a spoiler related question that I don't think Reagan had gotten to, which is, you guys have both gotten to Hades. The first time you got to the 4th level, did your just heart drop when you saw Cerberus and you were like, oh, don't make me fight Cerberus?
I thought for sure I was gonna have to fight Cerberus, and that was very satisfying when you're just gonna get him a treat. You just gotta get him a nice give him some food. I was really disappointed when I thought I was gonna have to fight Cerberus.
I was kind of pretty sure that you were not going to have to fight Cerberus, and it's not really related to the fact that like a video game that makes you kill your own like 3-headed Clifford the Big Red Dog is just beyond the pale. It's more about I kind of wish we had spent a little time talking about the visuals of the game in this, but there are some things that are really good to say about the visuals of Supergiant games, but one thing that they're not great at doing is really big, really active 3D models. Like so I think the closest thing to like a large 3D modeled boss that they have in any of their games would be the Lernian Bone Hydra. And that is a very like old school, like, you know, it has 5 identical heads essentially, and like neck bones, you know. There's a reason that it works well as like a skeleton with like a floaty heads. So but that is kind of a thing about I'm gonna just say this here now, even though we're in the post spoiler break. Like, if there is a house visual style to Supergiant's games, it's very weird. It's this sort of visual style of isometric, iconic cut and paste, where, you know, visual elements are going to be really cool and colorful and well done, but like cut and pasted and reused everywhere. And they're particularly sparing with 3D models, especially of people. Like, I would say the people that you actually see in this game, like Nyx, where they're modeled into the world, like are very rare. Most of the enemies in most Supergiant games are really pared down. They might be like a white circle that shoots a laser beam, you know. If you think back to like Pyre, like they had like a set of looks, like, and they justify this by saying like you're wearing like ceremonial masks, but it like cuts down on the number of like 3D models that they need to do for different kinds of characters.
I know that in some, not like a documentary, but some YouTube video I saw, they were talking about how the game is programmed so that the characters like cannot overlap with one another. So like they put in like an extra week of work into being able to overlap Zagreus with Cerberus to be able to pet him.
Yes.
And they were gonna, they were gonna add in like multiple ways to pet him, but they were like, no, we can't devote as much time as it takes to do this, because it just breaks the game for sprites to touch.
That is so weird. And yet, like, this is the company that I think does the most beautiful menus and like UI stuff of almost anybody. Like the mirror, the Well of Charon. Like the look of these things is just so gorgeous. But
Everything
again,
great.
we're talking post spoilers, and these are not spoiler discussions.
Well, and I was just gonna say I played this entirely 100%. I've played Switch handheld, so like some of that stuff doesn't really stick out to you when it's all just on the small screen of Switch. But what they do really well, though, is while you're right, they're pretty simple. Everything's very recognizable. Like you learn what everything does and how they do it pretty quickly, and it's really easy to sort of just look down at the map and be like, okay, I know what enemies are there and what they do.
There's not many like story spoiler that like are super interesting to talk about. I think spoiler talk is more centered around like mechanics, because I know some people wouldn't want to be like told, Theseus and the Minotaur are the third boss of the game. So like, who's your favorite boss, guys?
Yeah, or what? Who's your favorite boss, or what boss did you get like the most stuck on?
I will 100% take this as an opportunity to complain about Theseus and Asterius. I feel like honestly, like I love them as characters. I also hated Theseus as a character, but as a boss fight, absolutely more challenging than Hades. The number of times it took me to beat Theseus, I haven't beaten Hades, but I will say now that I think probably. But Theseus and Asterius took me many attempts to work out like a decent strategy for, because you have Theseus, who is a lot like one of the most difficult enemies that you see in Elysium, which is like the spear guy.
The shield
so
guy.
he's like throwing his spear at you, but he's also got like a spin attack and like close attacks. And glad we're in post spoiler break. One of the most absurd things that like shocked me the most at the time, he can do the calls that you can do to the gods.
Yeah.
Like
he only does that when
and
he's
use
at,
those
like,
against you.
half health or like a third health. So I usually would
And
say
it just covers the whole.
Yeah.
Just covers the whole map. Yeah.
And then you're fighting him simultaneously with Asterius, who is, you get to fight him once on his own in some runs, but then like he's coming at you with an axe, and he can leap really long distances and do a slam attack. And you're in a very open space that's not all that big. It's smaller than some of the early boss arenas. And there's like these pillars that you can hide behind. So what is you guys' strategy and advice for the Theseus and Asterius fight for people who might be doing that one?
Focus Asterius first, because it does not matter if Asterius is dead or not. If you get Theseus to low enough health, he will start summoning gods, and it doesn't matter if the bull is dead or not.
Yeah. That was going to be my same advice. And he's just so much easier to deal with when you don't have a gigantic chariot riding bull just like rampaging around the room, because you do have to be a lot more finesse with Theseus. You have to hit him from behind, kind of bait him around and try to get the right attacks on and avoiding his shield, whereas Asterius, you can just go at anywhere.
Yeah.
So focus the Minotaur. That said, like a lot of the builds that I have been more successful with have been around like area of effect or just applying, damage, like countdowns to people. So I have tried to like get them together and hit them both as much as you can when possible. But if you're going to focus one down, the Minotaur is definitely the right choice.
One tip that I think was not obvious to me until I had been going through this many times, and I probably should have realized earlier, is that a lot of the furniture kind of elements, by which I mean like pillars, the weird tables, stuff like that, those stop enemies, but they don't stop you if you dash. So you can
dash through everything.
Yeah, you can dash through pretty much everything, even like walls and stuff in places that you would not expect. So, like
general advice.
That once I realized that was especially useful for things like the Asterius fight, where like he's quite fast and charging literally behind you. The ability to like dash through a pillar and he'll like smash the pillar is very, very helpful.
Just general
Yeah.
advice that I would offer to anyone is just dash more.
Mhm.
Just dash and attack more. I would say just press the dash and attack button and move towards enemies. That's it. That's how you play the game. Don't worry about
Well-
don't worry about moving or out of the way or anything. Just dash. Just be hyper aggressive.
What about like if you dash right onto an enemy and now you're dead? That seems like the problem though. You gotta be really good with that dash.
Yeah, it is funny though, because you'll enter into these stages, and I will have realized that I really managed the entire fight from like a small corner of the stage, and then after I've beaten it, I'm sort of scanning the room for pots and other things that you can get. I'll be like, man, this map was huge. Why did I spend the entire time just in that corner? And so to your point, Robert, just like always moving and always trying to apply damage at all times everywhere. It was a big step forward for me because I was always trying to be a lot more tactical and like, stand your ground and like cast and throw the shield or whatever. But it's like, no, you got to play kind of like a maniac.
Yeah,
But
I used to not play as fast when I first started, but like once you beat Hades for the first time, you can unlock a pact, and one of them is to give yourself a time limit for each stage, and that can decrease down to like you have to clear Tartarus in 5 minutes. And I was like, well,
That's crazy.
how the hell do you do that? And then I just started being a madman.
what is your keepsake like strategy?
Well, it depends on what I'm running. If I'm running casually, I always start with Poseidon because like his dash, I just can't get enough of it. But if I'm like trying to rush through the game, like I think Reagan said earlier, I my best time is completing it in like 11 minutes. So I would always start with Zeus and get his attack. I use Zeus's keepsake because like I don't think we ever covered it. You can guarantee a god pops up. This is way past spoiler break. Nobody's listening to me explaining this. So I always choose Zeus and then Poseidon and then Demeter or Aphrodite. And if I like find those, I usually pick. Oh well, I use Hades keepsake.
Yeah. Nice.
But that's just for speed running. If I'm like playing casually, I'll usually use Thanatos's just for fun because it's like if you don't get hit, or I'll use Hermes. Just shit that makes you hit harder.
Yeah, so the run that I had today that I was successful on, I used Thanatos, I think it's called the Pierced Butterfly, and every time you successfully complete an encounter without taking damage, you gain 2% to your damage. And what I've liked about using that one is that, like, health is your most precious resource in this game, right? Every time you take damage, it's going to require some sort of effort to get that health back. So everything you can do to reduce the damage you take, like, the better, right? And I lose focus sometimes on like avoiding all damage. So by using the Pierced Butterfly, it has helped me maintain that like focus on don't take damage. And then you get an actual literal benefit in the game too. And when I won today, I ended up with a 28% bonus damage because I cleared 14 encounters without taking any damage. And so I was like so powerful by the time I got to the end. It was great. And I don't know that I would have, obviously the bonus damage is great, but that like constant focus of don't take damage, don't take damage, don't take damage, like, is also what made me so successful on it.
I'd say the best keepsakes for like beginners or people that like haven't beaten Hades like numerous times would be Cerberus's, which gives you extra health, or Skelly's. When I was that just gives you an extra whole death defy So when I was first playing the game, like literally anytime, I would get to Styx. Is it the Temple of? Yeah,
The last round.
yeah, the last level. Like no matter how the run was going or anything like that, I could have 3 Death Defies left. I would always just turn on Skelly's Keepsake just to have that extra cushion.
Yeah. The only problem with Pierced Butterfly is if you take it away,
You lose the benefits.
don't-
yeah,
you lose the benefit.
you
So
do,
like
with Lambent Plume, you do the same thing.
yeah, I couldn't justify like, well, is another Death Defy worth losing 28% bonus damage? And like, no, I don't think it is. I think I would kill someone so much faster with it. So there also the one they said gives you plus health. That ultimately, once you've unlocked all of the Death Defies, that one becomes more worth it than another Death Defy if you are adding 50 health to every life. So I started out using Skelly's for a long time, and then I was using the plus health one, and then lately I've been doing Pierced Butterfly. But I've been interested in like, I could never think of why would you ever like really like, why would you trade in more health, extra Death Defy, more damage for the guarantee of having a god at the beginning? And your explanation of just ensuring that you get like a sort of build dependent boon right out of the gates
Definitely.
really, really makes sense. And then you are also free. I assume then if you've used Poseidon's for the first stage, you are for sure switching it out after the boss.
I don't think I don't think it guarantees it. Like if you keep it equipped, I think it only does it once.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
So
you run into
that
them
makes
again,
a
it
lot
still
more
buffs
sense.
the like the chance of having a good one. Let's talk for a second, while we're on this subject, about Erebus and Chaos. Like, how much do you like the Chaos boons? Because I found myself really liking the Chaos boons if I could get them early.
Unless there's a Daedalus hammer, I pick Chaos. Like if I am in a room and there's like a boon and a palm of power, but also there's a Chaos Gate, I'll always take the Chaos Gate.
Yeah, the Chaos Gates are great. And so the Chaos Charm that lets you jump in those holes without taking any damage is nice, but the buff to the actual boons you get, I think, is also really good. And for listeners, those are they usually come with a trade-off. Not only are you taking damage to actually go to Erebus to pick up the Chaos boons, but those Chaos boons then usually then they come with some kind of trade-off. You accept them, and then you'll have some kind of limitation, like, you're at first for the next 3 encounters you can't earn any money, but then afterwards your attack deals 30% more damage, stuff like that.
It's always broken.
So yeah, they're great. Honestly, they really are. I think we probably don't want to dwell too much longer on mechanical stuff here in the post spoiler break, and I will mention right now. I texted Reagan because I was not clear on how it was that he was leaving the call to avoid spoilers,
And then editing.
but then also will be editing the episode. And I texted him, and he said, "Oh no, maybe Nate can edit that part. I'm an idiot." So, yeah, nice one, Reagan. You've only been at this for 5 years, so. But
Have you guys fought Karen?
no, I didn't know you could fight Karen.
Oh, okay.
No, I knew that was a thing, but I haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I don't know if it's after you beat Hades for the first time or something like that. But
Karen's my fave.
But yeah, in the shop, sometimes there'll just be a bag of 300 gold behind him, and if you take it, he transports you to Erebus. It's like the hardest boss fight in the game.
Wow.
That's awesome.
And for winning,
Do you-
you get a 20% discount for the rest of that run. That's it.
Ugh. So do you
know,
do it then? Do you go for the fight?
Hell no. If I'm rushing,
I have
if I'm
found
rushing through it, no, but
going all in on Karen with his boon is actually better than I would have expected. Like, his boon gives you a discount on the Well of Charon, which is just like an altar that will show up, in other miscellaneous rooms, and also a discount at his store.
Does it?
I think.
I thought Karen's Boon just gave you like bonuses.
No.
For well stuff.
The stuff that I think it's actually not a discount. It's the length of time that the things you get from the well affect. So
like if you get an attack,
which is actually better than that's what it was. It's better than you think, because the powers that you get from those well items are actually quite strong. Things like just a fat bonus to your attack damage, and suddenly it will last for like 12 encounters if you have the boon on. And those can stack, and you will see those wells more often than like every 12 encounters. They will come up.
Yeah.
Especially if you prioritize them. And it's possible to really get rolling on the money, especially if you have the mirror ability that says at the end of each like section of the game, you get a big chunk of change equal to a percentage of the amount of money you're already carrying.
Yeah.
So that I did find one of my best runs, where of course I did end up dying to Hades, was one that I basically just went all in on Karen and a big money strategy, which was played out very differently from the other strategies that I've tried. But let's talk about what happens after you beat Hades.
You sure? You meet Persephone, your mom, your cool mom, and then you die because you cannot spend a long time on the surface. And then once you beat Hades like 10 times, do you guys care? Spoilers? Yeah.
No, we're in post-spoiler break,
okay.
And I have already spoiled this for myself.
Okay. Once you beat Hades 10 times, Persephone comes back to the underworld, which is fun. But then the game is weird because it's like, why am I still running this game after my mom comes back? Because the whole goal of the game is to get my mom back. Well, you become like a security guard for Hell, and it's your job to bolster the defenses of Hades, of the underworld, and you're now trying to reach the surface to inform your father of the issues with his defenses for people trying to escape. So you go from like trying to find your mom to like, this is your job now. It's your job.
You just become Paul Blart. You're Paul Blart, Hades cop. Cool. What a power curve. Yeah, that's fun.
It's really good.
Well, do you feel like narratively there was a good payoff to the escape from Hell and to the conclusion that you reached?
Yes.
Or, conclusion as it is?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of the best games that's come out this year in terms of like storytelling and shit like that. Am I allowed to swear? Is that a thing?
Yeah,
yes.
You are.
Oh,
you
okay.
are allowed.
But yeah, there's just so much stuff that you can unlock, and then even after you beat Hades and get like to the surface, you start unlocking the ability to alter people's contracts in the underworld. So like, for example, like you can reunite Eurydice and Orpheus by paying like X amount of diamonds, or you can reunite Achilles and Patroclus, or you can take away Sisyphus's sentence and just make him like a free man. But those each take like 5 diamonds. So it makes sure like you've got to clear this game another 5 times before you can unlock this extra story stuff.
That's wild. Yeah. But again, they do such a good job of like why would I, as a player who actually has to commit the time to this, like, why would I do those things? Well, if you're that far into the game, you probably care about these characters, and it's fun. The game is fun. Like, I think that like this whole thing wouldn't work
if it wasn't fun.
If it wasn't if it wasn't fun to clear the dungeons,
Oh,
right?
yeah, it's just a blast to keep playing. I'm at a point where certain NPCs, if I don't have like active quest lines with them, in the overworld, like in the hub world, I'll just walk up to them and they'll just be like, "I got nothing else to say."
But yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's only so much dialogue. Even 21,000 lines of dialogue have to run out at some point, right? 300,000 words you're going to get through all of those at some point. So all good things must come to an end. But I think when it comes to a roguelike and being compelled to continue to play it beyond just like the skill of it, but actually the story of it, it's a pretty significant triumph that they've pulled off with this game. And I think with its success, we're going to see, if you're not a fan of roguelikes, Hades definitely didn't help your future gaming prospects, because I think we're going to see a lot of companies try to emulate what Supergiant just pulled off with Hades.
Yeah,
which I'm looking forward to.
it's game of the year. It's the best game I've played this year. Not my personal favorite game I've played this year, but I've logged so much time into it that, like, man, it's so good.
I just have a hard time even thinking about what games came out this year versus like any other year, and what have I been doing with my time for the last like 9 months. I don't know, but Hades has filled up a significant portion of the last several weeks, and I'm
the year's definitely gone slow enough that I was like, oh man, Final Fantasy VII Remake came out this year. That feels like it was 4 years ago.
That feels like it was like a decade ago. I think we didn't actually say it at the top of the episode, but we always do some version of a Game of the Year episode at the end of the year, and I don't think we're going to include this in the running simply because it really does not fit within what we traditionally think of as a short game, but we just really wanted to cover it for this episode, or for the show.
And then the Game of the Year is Wide Ocean Big Jacket. It's the best game.
So good, really.
So I bet that ends up pretty high on our list as well, but we'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think this is probably I think we could just continue talking about this all night.
Oh yeah.
But I think we have to call it. At some point,
got
this
to
feels as good a time as any. So, Robert, thank you so much for being here with us.
Absolutely.
And it was really helpful having your depth of knowledge on the show. And Shane, anything you wanted to add before we break?
No, I just want to say thanks for joining us, and I'm really glad to have had you on the episode, and this has been a fun one.
Thank you.
I enjoyed this game a lot, and I have enjoyed having a chance to chat about it with you.
Yeah, it was a blast being on it.
Cool. Well, Shane, make sure you post in the channel when you get your first victory, so we can look at the spec you ended up with.
Like I said, I may have to turn that God mode on because my hands are claws for the last few weeks.
Yeah, that sucks.
And then you can post your screenshot of your time, and then I'll be like, "How does it take that long?"
I remember what it took that long. Really?
Yeah, I know. You probably looked at my 45 minutes and you were like, "Man, I could have cleared it 4 times in that amount of time."
Like, oh yeah, that's how normal people play the game.